Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today I'm revisiting the Jeskai control deck for the best of one ladder with the additions from Secrets of Strixhaven, which introduces Resonating Lute as a powerful 4-mana artifact that essentially doubles our mana when it comes to casting instant and sorcery spells. Can occasionally also tap it to draw a card if we have 7 or more cards in hand, which can certainly come up in a control deck. So the Lute can set up some very nice turns, and one of the best spells we can cast with all that extra mana is Jeskai Revelation. For 7 mana, we get an instant that can return a spell or permanent to its owner's hand, so can even get around uncounterable spells for what it's worth. Can deal 4 damage to any target, make a pair of Prowess Monk tokens, which will act as our primary win condition. We get to draw 2 cards and to gain 4 life. So Jeskai Revelation does it all, and it's the perfect way to stabilize and turn the corner for a control deck. So we don't really need any additional win conditions besides the Jeskai Revelation, and we even have 2 copies of Flashback to help replay Revelation later in the game, and now for 8 mana total we get another Revelation potentially, and that's perfect with a Lute in play since we just need to tap 4 lands to make that happen. Flashback also gives us additional access to some of our more niche answers. We can always get back a sweeper or a counter spell or just a card draw effect, but we can also maybe get back or a braid if we are up against an artifact deck and need to destroy an additional artifact. And with Get Lost we can maybe once again answer a creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, so it's nice to have access to multiple of those effects in matchups where they're effective, and that's especially applicable in best of one where you don't know exactly what you're up against. And then I'm also trying 2 copies of Erode as a cheaper version of Get Lost. Does not hit enchantments, but can still destroy creatures or planeswalkers. But the big drawback is that our opponent does get a tapped basic land in return, so you don't usually want to cast Erode super early in the game when that extra land can potentially snowball to the opponent's advantage. But being 1 mana does have its advantages. Much easier to flashback and cast an Erode for just 2 mana total, and then Erode can maybe make use of an extra mana that would otherwise go to waste, especially with a Resonating Lute doubling our mana. If we're casting, let's say, a Stock Up, then we would tap 2 lands and still have an extra mana that potentially goes to waste, so now we can still maybe use that on a 1 mana Erode. Stock Up, of course, a very nice card draw spell in control. And then 3 steps ahead is our primary counter spell, since we can also make use of all the extra spree modes, especially with Lute doubling our mana. So then we can also maybe make a token that's a copy of an artifact or creature we control, can maybe make an extra monk or even an extra Lute, especially with 7 cards in hand. We can then keep drawing more and more, and we can also draw to discard with it, which is another way to cycle through the deck. So 3 steps is awesome. Then to make sure we have some graveyard hate in best of one, I'm running 2 copies of Kudzil's Flanker, since we can pretty easily disguise it by just keeping up our mana, and then in response to, let's say, a Kevero trying to reanimate the Bringer of the Last Gift, we can flash it in and exile the opponent's graveyard, and then it's going to take them a while to rebuild their graveyard, at which point we can also use 3 steps to copy the Flanker to once again exile their graveyard, so that's another fun interaction. And then we also still have 2 No More Lies as a cheaper counter spell. Of course, does fall off in the late game once the opponent can pay for it, but it's still nice to have access to early. And then Lightning Helix as a more flexible burn spell that also gains 3 life, can also go face, so can also help close out the game once we have a few Prowess Monk tokens and are ready to turn the corner. And then as a bit more instant speed card draw, Consult the Star Charts, we'll usually want to kick it. And then Day of Judgment as our sweeper of choice, 4 mana, just the cleanest, most efficient sweeper, and that way we don't need to worry about how large the opponent's creatures might get and potentially survive other damage-based sweepers instead. And of course, since we're playing the Lute, we're not going to want to play with Ultima, since that would also destroy our artifact. And then the mana base also got a pretty big upgrade, since we now have access to the slow lands, at least for some of the color pairs. So Sundown Pass is back, and so is Stormcarved Coast. And then we still have, of course, the classic shock lands as kind of the foundation of most mana bases. And the one of Mistrise Village to potentially make our spells uncounterable can also be useful against other control decks. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump in some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with keepable hands. Got a good mix of interaction and card draw. And don't need to prioritize lands anymore. Turn 1 islands and an opt. So it could be some sort of Izzet deck. Could be mono blue tempo, which I've seen before. And Izzet confirmed. Opponent plots a Slick Shot. Nice play in the face of open mana. Alright, not gonna tap out for stock up. Just gonna pass. And then, yeah, possible our opponent's got more things to plot. Runs out the slick shots. Starts with an opt. And now Storm Chaser's talents. And a Boomerang Basics to bounce the talent. So I'm probably just gonna Helix the Slick Shot here. And this turn could maybe abrade the token, don't expect any other artifacts. And then still have Helix available. Eventually we'll need to stock up to refuel. And the flow state's a nice one to draw to. Can also use Get Lost on the talent in response to them leveling it up. So then they won't get anything back with it. Because our opponent is ahead on cards here. Alright, so I'll need to stock up and still find an untapped lane. In which we did. And then... do I want another stock up? I already have one in hand. So, yeah, maybe we aim for the Jeskai Revelation, even though I'm somewhat far from casting it. Or just get another stock up and then we can keep up with the opponent's threats. Sleight of hand's fine. And yeah, this is perfect, so Get Lost in response. Alright, so we can stock up again, making sure to leave up double blue. And then take 3 steps. I don't think we need Flanker, even though it has some game against Storm Chaser's talent. So we're getting to the point where if we find a Lute, we can easily spree 3 steps. A Sauna, okay, that seems worth countering, otherwise they get to draw an extra card each turn. Opponent must be holding a Burst Lightning here for 1 mana. They had another talent, also pretty good. And yeah, we can cast the Jeskai Revelation. How do we want to handle it? Could still wait on Jeskai Revelation. Although it starts applying a good bit of pressure, even though I'm sure they can deal with the Monk tokens. So then if they go to level up the talent, I can maybe bounce it. Another flow state is acceptable. And another talent, sure. Token attacks, no blocks. Our opponent goes to level up, and now we respond. So bounce the talents, deal 4 to the token, and find another revelation. Okay, so now we can sort of leverage this tempo advantage with our monks. Could go for another revelation, although I'm not opposed to stock up. And maybe look for more cheap burn spells. Mistrise does not enter untapped yet. Find the Lute, okay. That's gotta be worth it. And then I'll grab a Consult to go with it. So then I can just tap out for the Lute. Trigger Prowess, get in for 6, and then at 27 we should be safe. And yeah, opponent does not want to play anymore. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a Day of Judgment as a potential catch-up mechanism. I won't have any early interaction on turn 2, so we can fall behind. But our opponent appears to be a slower deck as well. Our mana is pretty much perfect at least. So blue-white with the Voice of Victory, so it might be more of a tempo deck. And yeah, the Voice is a problem, since it stops my counter spells. So I'll have to main phase Consult, grab the Get Lost. And then Day of Judgment will maybe be our reset button, but I'm sure our opponent's gonna have ways to counter that. Another Voice. Alright, Helix is decent, so we can try that instead of the Get Lost. Just so we don't put all our eggs in the Day of Judgment basket in case it doesn't resolve. But now it's looking pretty good. Okay, so 3 voices dealt with, and now we can potentially play our draw-go playstyle. Gonna wait on the stock up. And then another 3 steps. Could be okay. I'll have to use them pretty aggressively. Opponent's just activating their land to draw discard. Gets rid of a Seam Rip. And once again. So maybe trying to hit their land drop. Gets rid of another Seam Rip. And yeah, may as well apply a bit of pressure with the flanker here. Gain 2, scry 2. I don't think we care about their graveyard. A Braid isn't super high priority. Again, 3 steps ahead is also not super vital. Now we can stock up, making sure to leave up double blue. And then find the Lute and Hallowed Fountain probably. So I get to keep up 3 steps. Ideally play the Lute with counterspell backup so we can make sure it resolves. As we draw the 4th 3 steps. Can also cast it with a Spree here. A Drowner's fine. So I can't quite play the Lute and pay for No More Lies, which they could have. So I'll pass a turn. Another Drowner. Now I could be convinced to 3 steps counter draw. Could also counter make a copy of the flanker. Just so we have a blocker for the Drowner in case they have Enduring Curiosity they want to deploy. And then gain 2, scry 2. Land is fine. Another Drowner, sure. So now I can pay for No More Lies. And now we have double 3 steps available. Although, of course, the timing is a little awkward, because if we cast one in the opponent's main phase, we won't have that mana in their second main phase. Enduring Curiosity, perhaps? No. I'll just take 4. And then I would rather untap first and have more options available. Okay, so we've got our flankers back on defense. Stock up, have a mana floating. Find consult and a land at this point. And then probably fine to just pass. Not gonna try to outrace the tempo deck. But we've got such a huge mana advantage now. Quantum Riddler warped is acceptable. Opponent's attacking. It is somewhat tempting to make an extra copy of the flanker instead of trading both. So maybe trade the token, take 2. Play this kicked. Could see a spell snare, counter it. We don't. Alright, and then it's probably time for Revelation and Flashback to replay the Revelation. Could technically cast it end of turn, but then it's without counterspell backup, and No More Lies would exile it, so then I can't flash back. So instead, I think we just untap. Alright, so I've got 7 cards in hand, so first draw with a Lute. And then pass a turn, planning to Jeskai Revelation at some point. Right, hardcast Riddler, so this is a pretty good opportunity. Unbounce this, deal 4. And then I can flash back Revelation again and just win the game next turn by triggering Prowess a bunch. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a hand that's missing blue mana. Flood Farm does not have Plains or Island to go with it. I can technically erode my own creature to get a land. That's usually not ideal. I mean, we're okay against creature decks. And then Flanker helps against Graveyard combo. So there's a world where this can work out. Opponent's Golgari found the Storm-Carved Coast, which I can play already. If I draw another one, we'll have double blue for 3 steps. So it looks like maybe a mid-range deck. The bats I could erode, but I don't really want to give them an extra land this early. Then they might take the Get Lost or the Counterspell, although we don't have double blue yet. In general, as Jeskai control, we don't mind fighting Golgari mid-range. Alright, another 3 steps. So this might be Flanker just to scry 2. Badger Mole is acceptable. Not that I can counter it anyway. And another bat. Yeah, I don't think I'll need the Graveyard Hate from Flanker in this matchup. But yeah, if we found a Day of Judgment, that would have been awesome. A Mountain does not enable the blue, so we can bottom both. Takes the Erode. Yeah, the Deep Cavern Bats are a delicate house of cards against a deck with a bunch of removal. So, found double blue, but it will be tapped for now. Flanker can play defense. So yeah, they could maybe resolve something scary here, like a Planeswalker. Although either Erode or Get Lost can answer it later. Another Badger Mole, okay. So now they still have access to 4 mana. And another one. So this is definitely more of a rampy deck than I imagined at first. So they might be trying to go off with a new Wither Bloom as well, to set up a lethal Nature's Rhythm. And a Curator. Also relevant in the matchup, since we do have Flashback. But yeah, if I can just 3 steps, draw discard and find a Day of Judgment, the opponent's plan doesn't look great. Although yeah, opponent making me discard 2 cards. So I guess in response I'll draw discard myself. So we have a better idea what we're working with. Consults can dig pretty deep. So I need to discard a card, make it a Braid. And then discard 2. It's probably 3 steps and a land. Does mean that if their last card is a Nature's Rhythm, I'm just dead next turn. But they could have cast a huge one already. So I'd rather keep the Consult. And then we can try to dig for Day of Judgments, which would be pretty effective here. And sure, I guess I'll trade now. Alright, play a land, pass with Consult up. Curator has creature, sorcery, instant, so can't quite get up to a 7/7 yet. So big attack coming in. I could still Consult and technically hit an Erode, although I don't see myself casting it. But I guess now our opponent's pretty much tapped out, so we may as well draw and see what we find. Alright, there's a Day of Judgment, and then probably want another Consult afterwards, since we're still far from a Revelation. So we found what we were looking for. Flanker's gone. And now we have a road back. So yeah, opponent had a good start, but didn't quite get the finisher they needed to close out the game right away. Another Banter Mole, that's the last one. Could erode in response so they don't get extra mana. Sure. They will get an extra tapped land, but at least they can follow up with a 3 or 4 mana card. So take 1. And now we just need to find Jeskai Revelation to take over. Don't think I need to main phase Consult, we can wait. Take 1. Alright, so this is the big turning point. Probably could have tapped a bit better to keep up a Lightning Helix mana. Found Revelation, and do I want the Lute to go with it? I can play the Lute, and then have 6 mana left, so I can't quite Revelation. Can Revelation as is, so maybe it's just Revelation stock up. I found the Lute anyways. So, again, seems safer to just cast a Revelation first, as opposed to going Lute. Sure, I can stock up and then maybe still find some interaction, but let's just play it absolutely safe. And a Bloodletter, alright. That we can easily answer. So then I think I like bounce the land, take out the Bloodletter. Possible they have a removal spell left in hand, but they won't be able to fizzle the Revelation since we have 2 targets. If they can make both targets invalid, they can indeed fizzle it. Alright, our opponent seems to have disconnected here. They did not want to let the revelation resolve. But yeah, we're in great shape here, getting some life back, drawing more cards. And then next turn, Lute into stock up can refuel. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a hand that's missing blue altogether. So, yeah, this one's pretty rough. I think I got a mulligan. Alright, this is better. And then we could try to just keep Lute plus Revelation to kind of go over the top. And then a Braid or 3 steps is the question. 3 steps is more generally applicable. A Braid could not be very useful against control, let's say. So we're slow to get set up, but if we can slam down a Lute and untap with 8 mana, we should be in great shape. And No More Lies was a good draw. Facing an Is It deck. There's about 4 or 5 varieties, it's hard to say which one. I'll counter the Altar. It's not as scary as, let's say, a Stormchaser's Talent, but we just want to preserve our life total early on. Opponent plots a Slick Shot. I'm somewhat tempted to just draw discard with 3 steps. So I can try and hit my land drop for Lute, and then with 1 turn, I don't think we die to the Slick Shot attack, although it's not impossible. But then from there we should be able to turn it around. So Archive can go. And especially with another Revelation, going back to back, should put us in a great spot. Small chance the opponent has their own Braid. Alright, opt, trigger Slick Shots, but from here it's going to be difficult to get to 20 power. Alright, Wild Ride, I guess, is a good starting point. And Secret Identity. And another opt. Alright, that's fine. So we take 14. And then now I just want to main phase a Revelation to make sure it resolves. And then I won't quite have Lightning Helix available in the opponent's turn, because with a Lute we can only make 1 color and not both red and white. So I could pass and have both Revelation and Helix up, but let's see what we draw with it. So bounce the Steam Vents, deal 4 to the Slick Shots. Just doing this main phase on the off chance that our opponent has some counter spells or protection spells. And then what I could do is just Helix face just to gain 3. I guess never mind, since it floated blue mana, that's not an option. Alright, so just gotta hope they don't have another Slick Shot into a pump spell here. Well, they do. Sleight of Hand. So Wild Ride would be +5, so that's still a little bit short. And an Altar. Alright, so now we're in great shape. Consult's great too. So we can take out the Slick Shots, bounce the Altar. Trigger Prowess a bunch. And this time I'll be able to keep up Helix in the opponent's turn. Yeah, I don't think we need to use the floating mana necessarily. But yeah, next turn between Stock Up, Consult and Helix we can also trigger Prowess enough for lethal. So the Altar is fine. Slick Shots number 3. And a Wild Ride on the Altar. So they're kind of forcing our hand now. But we should still have enough prowess with all the card drawn next turn that we can easily present lethal. And there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a functional hand. Kick things off with an archive, and then got double blue, double white. Probably fine to keep a revelation as something to work towards. So now finding the Lute would be ideal. Facing black-white. Could be a graveyard deck, in which case we want to look for the flanker. Maybe going tapped fountain made more sense, since I'm more likely to want double white. So I don't need to shock myself. We have Coast for red. It is an Abzan deck, so not entirely sure what to make of it yet, but we'll stock up for stock up and a land. The slow lands that are back in Standard are definitely a big boon for these Jeskai control decks. Ancient Cornucopia from our opponent, so they've got a life gain angle. Possible they're playing more than 3 colors. I could try to tap out for Lute, although, you know, green does have access to multiple ways to deal with artifacts and enchantments. But then again, it's not like I have a counterspell in hand to protect it, so I think we just cast a Lute and hope for the best. If I get to untap next turn, I can first draw a card with it before playing a land out. And our opponent's got their own stock up, so it is a blue control deck as well. They may have access to Inevitable Defeat, which is an answer to the Lute. That's uncounterable. Although you can still bounce it with Jeskai Revelation. Alright, so make sure to draw. And then now I can cast a Revelation already. I could both Revelation and stock up, in fact. But I think I'm happy to pass. In case we need to Revelation something in the opponent's turn. We're still getting ahead with a Lute each turn. So I'm not desperate for extra cards. Our opponent did indeed have the Inevitable Defeat, but as we've said, we can either bounce the defeat or bounce the Lute itself, and then recast it. So we have some options. Maybe it's better to just bounce the Lute and recast it. If I want to leave up Get Lost, I would have to float a bunch of mana first. Alright. Revelation, bounce Lute, deal 4 to my opponents. And then opponent gains life of Cornucopia. Happy to keep 3 steps in hand. And then no need to get lost anything. Alright, drew a backup Lute. And then again I get to draw. Although I'm gonna have to discard to hand size a bunch. I guess I could have waited to activate this in the opponent's turn, since it's not limited to sorcery speed. So small mistake there. Alright, do I need Day of Judgment in this matchup? Probably not. Although Get Lost is also unlikely to be hugely important. Backup Lute in case they answer the first one. Quandrix the Proof. Does have Cascade, so we'll first see what they cascade into. Lessons from Life. Yeah, I guess I would rather counter the Lessons from Life, or we can let it resolve. And then Quandrix we can Get Lost. So I don't think I need to waste my counter spell here. Can wait until my turn to Get Lost, so I trigger Prowess as well. Could also consider copying the Lute, since we're actually making use of the card draw mode. Alright, so let us Get Lost Quandrix, trigger Prowess, and our opponent doesn't want to play anymore. But yeah, we were in a pretty commanding position, getting to stock up twice and have access to double the opponent's mana, basically. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We have what looks to be a functional hand. May have to consult early just to hit some land drops. And then Lute into Revelations, the big payoff. Facing Authority, so could be Control or the Artifact deck. With an Abrade in hand, we've got a nice answer to the first artifact they play. But could just be Blue-White or Jeskai Control. And it is indeed artifacts. Alright, so Repurposing Bay they can have. Definitely need to consult to find a land here. And take the blue one. Alright, so our opponent could have a 2-drop and then use Repurposing Bay to get a Synthesizer. They could also go for the 4-mana Battlefront, but I don't have a counterspell for it. So yeah, we could just go for a stock up to hit some more lands, so maybe next turn I can loot. Or at the very least hit my land drop. Does mean having to discard to hand size. The alternative could be to pass and maybe Abrade one of their artifacts end of turn. And then untap. And we're kind of in a similar position where I need to have drawn a land. So let's stock up. Find lands. And then probably like the counterspell more. And Get Lost seems kind of weak since it also gives the opponent artifacts, which can maybe grow their construct. Starting town enters tapped, and drew a Mistrise Village, which can enter untapped thanks to the mountain. Now, of course, my Lute could also get exiled by the opponent's artifacts, so ideally we play it with counterspell backup. But for now, I think I'm happy to pass with Consult and no more lies available. And then the Clayfired Bricks would get upgraded by the Repurposing Bay. So I could just destroy the Repurposing Bay itself. Then we don't make them spend the mana and they could resolve another card, but we do have a No More Lies as well. So I think it's worth it to Abrade the Repurposing Bay now. Maybe they have their own counterspells, which would be a bit surprising. I see Spectral Restitching makes sense since it also synergizes with other Synthesizer, which can then re-trigger stuff. But we had the counterspell. So Bricks resolves, but they don't have anything else going on. So now with the lands, I could play the Lute and play an unkicked Consult afterwards. If I wait one more turn, I can play Lute and play kicked Consult at the very least. Because they have to have an answer in hand since they haven't done much else in the meantime. I mean, for now I can just pass and play kicked Consults in the first place, so we'll see what happens. Hardcast Fire Crystal, thanks to the starting town. Could be scary later in the game, once they make some constructs, but for now it doesn't do anything. So I wouldn't mind finding a counterspell, found the 3 steps, and then probably like the stock up. So now I get to play Lute and keep up 3 steps. So we can protect it. Was a little bit short of playing Lute and immediately drawing a card with it. Saw Blades is fine. Opponent can maybe craft it to make a vehicle, but that's fine. And yeah, there's a Perilous Snare, which we suspected. So that I'm gonna have to fight over, and it's possible they'll have another one. Although Revelation could also bounce it. But yeah, if I get to untap here, we're super far ahead. Perfect. So our opponent's gonna maybe craft with artifacts. But now we have Lute plus Revelation and more card draw. So should be able to close out the game pretty quickly as well. Their creature does have haste thanks to the Fire Crystal, so they can attack for 5. Flanker the draw. Alright, so if I stock up, I'll still keep up Revelation in the opponent's turn. Find a land. I don't think I need another Day of Judgment, so I'll grab the Helix. So if I main phase the Revelation, I could still draw with a Lute, which may be worth it. And then, what do we want to bounce? I guess just Saw Blades, although they do get to replay it since my tokens are also tapped, so they can destroy one. Could bounce the Fire Crystal, make them recast it, losing 2 life. That's maybe better. And then 4 damage to my opponent. And then now draw with a Lute. And then play a land to keep up 3 steps. Perfect. So now we can draw an extra card each turn. Fire Crystal I could fight over, but I don't think it matters enough. I'll take another 5. Just need to counter the United Battlefronts and Synthesizers. And the opponent realizes that they're just too far behind here. Awesome, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. We have No More Lies and then a Lute. So we do still need some card draw. And we could fall behind early. I think I still try this, since we have a lot of card draw spells we can find in the meantime. And the second Lute's not ideal. So for now, I want to play Coast, so next turn I can keep up No More Lies, thanks to the Verge. Opponent's a mono red so far, plotting a Slick Shot. Alright, I guess I get a chance to counter it if they cast it next. Opponent plots another Slick Shot. That is scary. And yeah, I'm not going to be able to just tap out for a Lute, or else I'm definitely dead. So it's a bit of a waiting game now. Hired Claw, I guess, resolves. The problem is, once your opponent finds a third land, No More Lies is not going to be an effective answer to the Slick Shot. At least if I counter while I'm tapped out, or opponent may only have 1 mana to cast spells to trigger the 2 Slick Shots, so then I'm not necessarily dead. And they also have to think about the implications of a sweeper. So our opponent's gonna maybe go for it. Just a 1 Slick Shot. Okay, take 6. And draw a Flanker, which can also gain a bit of life. So tapping out for the Lute is asking for trouble. So I think we just gotta play a land and pass. And hope our opponent respects instant speed removal. The one thing we've got going for us is that our opponent's stuck on lands, so that buys us a bit more time. Gain 2, scry 2. And then a road is good, don't need another land. Although giving the opponent an extra land's not perfect. So if I were to play the Lute, I could still erode at the very least. Or I can wait 1 more turn, and then there's a chance I can both 3 steps and erode. That seems better. And then for now I can also keep both available. Can also maybe copy the Flanker with 3 steps at some point. Do we think our opponent's going to play any haste creatures on the ground? I think we're fine to get in for 3, start applying a bit of pressure. Yep, there's a haste creature on the ground. That's fine. So I don't actually hate 3 steps to copy the Flanker. And then I could still erode Slick Shot if I'd really like. A Revelation, that's a good one. So is No More Lies, so I can first No More Lies and then Revelation. Take the trade. And then now go Lute, keep up No More Lies, can still erode. And then next turn Revelation as the big turning point. Opponent found a third land, so they can slick shot. Kind of like the No More Lies here, because if they pay for it, they're fully tapped out. And then we'll still have Erode mana up. Just have to be careful when tapping here. Yeah, opponent's gonna let it get countered. So, yeah, let's erode the slick shots, and then, unless they've got something crazy, we'll get to untap with Revelation. Turn Inside Out to give them a creature when their creature dies. Alright, that's fine. Opponent does get an extra land, so they'll finally be able to empty their hand that they've been stocking up. But Revelation is awesome in this type of matchup. They've got some burn spells. Okay, so I don't think we need to main phase it. I will keep the flanker back on defense this time. Opponent turns up a Bastronaut, so I guess we won't be able to block that one. And Bastronaut tries to attack. Wait and see what they do. Full bore. Okay. I think the plan here is going to be to probably bounce the Bastronauts. Dreadmaw Ire would destroy the Lute. Anything else? Another Dreadmaw Ire, so it's possible they can deal 8 and then fling second main for the win. But the Revelation's gonna say no. So bounce Bastronauts, deal 4 to my opponent. And our opponent scoops it up, awesome! So yeah, opponent did get a bit unlucky to not draw a few more lands early on, and we managed to draw just enough interaction to eventually get the Lute plus Revelation going. So yeah, overall, this Jeskai Lute control deck seems pretty powerful. It's not always easy to tap out on turn 4 for the Lute, but in some matchups where you know your opponent doesn't have any immediate answers, you can afford to, and then once you untap with 10 plus mana, it's pretty trivial to take over from there, the Lute occasionally drawing additional cards as well. And in matchups where your opponents may have answers, you can just try to hang on to it until you can play the Lute with counterspell backup or other interaction, and then it can still provide a huge advantage even later in the game. So overall, I've been quite impressed with it. Of course, you don't necessarily want to draw multiples, so I don't think it's necessarily a 4-off in this more controlling build, where we don't need the Lute to double our mana like we did in the Mathemagics combo deck, where you really wanted it to double your mana. So there's a few ways to approach this. We could technically play Mathemagics as a finisher in this deck as well, but I don't think it's really necessary when Jeskai Revelation kind of does everything we need, including interacting with the opponent's game plan, which is usually more important. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.